back to Regency Rumors. I'm Dr. Kayla Jones, and here on my channel, I make videos about period dramas, history, and historical fiction. And today's video, I'm very excited because it's my favorite subject in the world, my own personal Roman Empire, the thing that if you were to ask me once a day, is there a subject that pops up in your mind at least once? And that is Jane Austen. So it's time for some historical Regency yapping. With the 250th anniversary of Jane Austen's birthday this year, there's going to be a ton of fun events on around the world, such as talks, festivals, and balls, and you can definitely expect a lot of Jane Austen content over here at Regency Rumors. Sorry, not sorry! I first found out about Jane Austen when I saw a trailer for this film called Pride and Prejudice that came out in 2005, and I was in my mid-teens at that point, and I remember the exact place I was when I watched the trailer and how I felt about it and how quickly I begged my mom to go and see the film in theaters. That's showing my age, but let's just not talk about that. Not gonna accept the fact that that movie is 20 years old now. A couple of months ago, it was announced that Netflix are making a new Pride and Prejudice. Now, Netflix are the people who made this Persuasion, and while I know that there are people that enjoyed this Jane Austen adaptation, I respect that people may like this film. I don't judge. I try not to judge. No, I think it's important that we don't yuck people's yums. The world is a mess right now, and I think people should be able to have their fun, and there is space for all different adaptations. But if you do want to listen to me rant more about the 2020 Persuasion with my husband Jordan, who's a Jane Austen newbie, then check this video out. I'm not gonna lie, I am nervous about a new adaptation of Pride and Prejudice, and quite frankly, with all the many remakes that have been coming out over the last 5 years, one really has to wonder, is it really time for a new Pride and Prejudice? The 1995 Pride and Prejudice will always be a classic. The 2005 Pride and Prejudice has had an absolute boom, a resurgence on TikTok, and is a favorite of the Gen Zers now, and people cannot get enough of the famous hand flex. So why now? Do we really need a new adaptation of Pride and Prejudice in 2025, or is this just like an easy marketable adaptation for studios to make that they know will be safe, will have a built-in audience, and it'll be a bit of fun, but possibly forgettable? In this video, we're going to go through the pros and cons of Netflix making a new Pride and Prejudice adaptation, so grab your bonnets and your exemplary boiled potatoes. Why did I write that? I'm such a cringy millennial. Let's get into it. First pro, we're going to start out positive: Netflix. Netflix is the largest streaming platform with a massive budget. As the home of Bridgerton, Stranger Things, and The Crown, Netflix has the resources and the cash to make a series with period-correct costuming, big-budget actors, and realistic, elaborate sets and filming locations. This could be potentially the biggest budget Pride and Prejudice or any Jane Austen-related film or show that's ever been made. With a global reach far beyond what the BBC ever had in the 90s, Pride and Prejudice could reach even more new Jane Austen fans worldwide on a platform like Netflix. I think for a really long time that media made around historical romance like Jane Austen's novels or the Brontes was considered something that lived in like small budget period drama land on BBC, ITV, or PBS, with occasional big budget films here and there, but never at the same level of, say, like a Star Wars franchise or the Avengers. Now, while I think Austen will never be at that sort of level in terms of merchandise and offshoot shows and films, I do think that if Bridgerton has taught us anything, it's that historical romance needs to stop being underestimated as popular by studios. Netflix has the opportunity to bring in a good director, costume designer, actors, and composer to really knock this out of the park. Making Pride and Prejudice would garner significant attention, memes, discussions, talks, and maybe more tourist footfall to places connected to Austen, like the Jane Austen Museum, the Jane Austen Center in Bath, and whatever filming locations that they choose to feature. Which, speaking of that, in June of last year, Jordan and I and my best friend from home came over to visit us in the UK, and we went to Chatsworth for the first time. And we were worried that we wouldn't be able to get in while she was visiting because on the website it said that they were closing for an entire week in the summer for filming. We managed to visit one day before they closed, but out on the lawns and in the courtyards there were these like massive lights and camera equipment everywhere that were ready for use, and we were like walking through the halls racking our brains what they could be filming that Chatsworth would close down for an entire week in the busiest season of the year. For a place like Chatsworth to agree to be closed for a week in prime tourist season makes me think that it's not something small. Like it'll be for a big production that they got paid well over enough to make it worth it for the doors to close at that time of the year. Now, could that have been for the new Pride and Prejudice? I don't think so, because I don't even think they've got through casting yet, but you never know. But I sure hope that Chatsworth is not going to be used for this new Pride and Prejudice. I think it's really important for these films and series to distinguish themselves from each other. Otherwise, you get an image of the older version stuck in your head, I think. I recently watched two different versions of Jane Eyre, the 2006 miniseries and the 2011 film, and they used the same exact filming location and essentially refilmed several scenes in the same place, in the same rooms, or the same exteriors, which only makes me compare the actors' performances and the script writing when I'm watching the two different versions, which I don't think is fair. And I think it's super distracting if you're someone like me that's been watching them for many years. It makes me feel like the 2011 director was like, this is a big budget film. No one's gonna care about some mini-series from 2006. Except for the diehard fans of classics and period dramas who watch multiple versions of the same story over and over and over and over again until they die. If they set this new Netflix show in Chatsworth, all we're going to be thinking about is Keira Knightley walking around the halls in the 2005 version. And there are so many other country houses across the UK, so they've got choices. So I don't think that they were filming Pride and Prejudice in Chatsworth, but like, what other big period drama production would they be doing at Chatsworth in the middle of the summer? And Chatsworth isn't really a Bridgerton house, I don't think. So if anyone knows what they were filming around that time, just give me a little clue, just a little morsel, a little tidbit, please. I won't tell anyone, I promise. Now onto a con, you guessed it, it's also in Netflix. With the success of Bridgerton, some people would say that Netflix knows how to make the Regency period appealing to the masses. However, the Regency period in the fantastical Bridgerton world is far different than that of Austen's Regency era. And I would be worried that Netflix making a Pride and Prejudice could turn into a Bridgerton 2.0. Our only other example of the Regency era made by Netflix is Persuasion, and we all know how that went down. Still have so many questions about that film that have gone unanswered, and I'd love for there not to be a repeat of that in Pride and Prejudice. Why was Persuasion turned into a comedy? Why did she write an upside down smiley face on a napkin? Does Dakota Johnson really have iPhone face? If you'd like more of a deep dive on iPhone face, check out this other video that I did. Essentially, it's one big rant on another classic adaptation coming out, Wuthering Heights, which is going to feature two Australian actors in a Yorkshire-based story. I feel like we're living in an age of studio execs not trusting studios to make original stuff, as in like not sequels or adaptations. And I worry that this is just an easy cash grab for Netflix, like an afterthought of, oh, no, however we make this, like people are going to watch it. It's Pride and Prejudice. It'll reach a certain level of success, so why not make it? On the other hand, I'm worried that like with Persuasion, they'll feel like that there needs to be something extra or something quirky or comical to get the attention of modern audiences. Or worse, that they'll make a version for viewers that they know are distracted on their phones, and we'll get this kind of casual viewership style of Pride and Prejudice that is akin to an Emily in Paris, where people can casually watch it in the background. I'm not against Emily in Paris. I enjoy content like that all the time. It is one of those things that you can watch casually and have it on in the background and still understand the general plot of it and be on your phone at the same time. I'd be interested to know whether or not Netflix would want to make a version of Pride and Prejudice like this, where you can have it on in the background for mostly the sweeping landscapes and the long melancholic stares out the window that you can kind of scroll on your phone while those scenes are going and not miss anything. Like, I feel like a new Pride and Prejudice out of nowhere that no one has asked for will have some sort of criteria that studio execs want out of it that makes the storyline different or have some sort of edge to it, like in Persuasion, for the sake of it being for a Gen Z audience that either only superficially connects to them or caters to them so much that it alienates all the other watchers. Either way, I think remakes like the recent Shogun or the second season of Wolf Hall that is far more dedicated to well-written scripts, outstanding acting, and realistic settings than needing to reinvent the wheel. That is what's going to make those types of shows classics for years to come. Netflix should consider the successes of new period dramas like this who lean more on just trying to make a darn good show, you know what I mean, than making anything else. And that's what I feel like they should be focused on when they're making their own Pride and Prejudice. So, pro number 2, the possibility of Netflix's Pride and Prejudice being a 4, 6, or 8-part series rather than a film. In terms of miniseries adaptations, it has been 30 years, so there is that. I wasn't alive then, so I wouldn't know. Anyways, there are going to be 1995 purists that say that they won't watch the new version, that the 1995 version is all we need, and I'm not necessarily disputing that, but y'all are going to watch it. You know, like, we're going to watch it. Come on. Like, we don't have a marathon version of Disney Plus making shows on shows on shows on shows in the Star Wars land. So beggars can't be choosers. Y'all are going to watch it. We're going to watch it. We may watch it and then like lament together, complain together online. We can get back on here and talk about how annoying it is if we didn't like it. But come on, like, you're going to watch it. You know what I mean? We're going to watch it. The biggest complaint of Austenites watching the 2005 version is that the short length cut out so much of Jane Austen's storytelling and made it rushed and too focused on style over substance. The 2005 version is my version of Pride and Prejudice. I know that it's not the one that's most true to Austen's work, but that hand flex and Dario Marinelli's score are a part of my DNA. But I also have a theory that whatever version of something that you watch first is the one that you're most attached to. It's not an exact science. I don't know why this is a thing, but for a lot of people, it is. Like I said before, I love the 2006 BBC version of Jane Eyre. It's the one I watched first, and I have a lot of emotional attachment to that miniseries. So when I watched the 2011 version, I was like, what is this? There was so much missing. It was rushed. The acting was muted, on and on and on. One of my friends watched the 2011 version first, and that's the one she's obsessed with. I don't even think I got her convinced to watch the 2006 version, and it pains me deeply every day. I don't make the rules. I just think that this is how it goes down. So make sure that your friends watch the version of your favorite film or series first so that you don't spend a lifetime arguing which version is better. Now, to me, the 2005 Pride and Prejudice and the BBC miniseries just feel like two separate types of media, so I will still watch both of them year after year, and I don't really have a strong stance on one being better than the other per se, but I will say it's so nice to have like a long version of a Jane Austen classic. I don't think that any of the other Jane Austen adaptations are as long as the BBC Pride and Prejudice, so I would definitely be down for a longer new version that is able to tell the story more fully. It's able to keep in characters that have been left out in short versions and really build a growing tension between Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy. And plus, I enjoy long walks in the meadows and scenes of women longingly staring out the window hour after hour. But I like it way more when I've got 8 hours of a miniseries to watch as opposed to like an hour and a half. I think another pro about this being a series is the fact that Dolly Alderton is slated to write the new series. I don't know a lot about Dolly Alderton, but I have heard people continually praise her writing. She's written the books Everything I Know About Love, Dear Dolly, and Ghosts, and also is a prominent podcast host. From what I can tell, she's known to write relatable, well-rounded characters and storylines that accurately portray the experience of being a woman in today's society and all its intricacies of dating, societal expectations, aging, and relationships. I could see her writing a series that really appeals to a new audience, that focuses a fair bit on Elizabeth's personal life beyond Mr. Darcy, like her complicated relationship with her mother, the flaws of her father, and her unique bond between her sisters. I think Pride and Prejudice gets boiled potato. I think Pride and Prejudice gets boiled down to a simple romance far too often, when Austen was really good at reflecting societal norms in her work, and I think Dolly Alderton does that as well. So I think it would be great to have a version that can really dive into that side of Pride and Prejudice and honor Austen as a writer. First, it was said that Daisy Edgar Jones was attached to the project, which I thought would have been an interesting choice. I thought she was great in Normal People and Where the Crawdads Sing, but I have heard that Daisy has pulled out of the project. Now, there are rumors of Emma Corrin, who was young Diana in The Crown and in the recent Lady Chatterley's Lover on Netflix. Emma Corrin is a natural in period dramas, so I think this could be a huge slam dunk. I do think, however, that it also really depends on who plays Mr. Darcy. A new adaptation has to have fire chemistry between the two leads, or it all falls apart. You could write the best Pride and Prejudice script ever made, and if the two main characters don't have chemistry, then people are not going to like it. So I am patiently waiting to see who they're going to cast. So the final con. We've got remake fatigue. Last year, Disney announced their film and TV lineup for 2025, and the majority of them are remakes or sequels. Even after the continual criticism of these live-action remakes that a lot of people are not resonating with, such as Mufasa, Snow White, and Pinocchio, which I didn't even realize had been made. Has anyone seen this? Whenever they're released, they fall short of viewer expectations. People are asking for something new, and it feels like originality is out the window. So why do they continue to do it? I mean, why? We all know why, but you get the frustration. It definitely feels like we live in an era of quantity over quality when it comes to film and television, and it will be interesting to see years down the line as, we look back now and consider classics like the 2005 Pride and Prejudice as to what will be seen as the classics that are being produced today. In terms of period dramas, there have been a number of remakes in the past few years that, again, no one has asked for. So some have went down well and others have not. We had a New Little Women, Emma, The Count of Monte Cristo, and Great Expectations and Persuasion. Oh, you didn't know there was a new Great Expectations? It's because no one was asking for it. No one. I don't know anyone that was asking for new Great Expectations. It had a strong cast with Olivia Colman as Miss Havisham, but there was nothing fresh about this new adaptation that would appeal to a new audience. The pacing was slow, the filming was really dark, which is another thing audiences have continually complained about that is not being listened to by directors or studios. The tone was really dark as well, which meant that for fans of Dickens, it felt like this adaptation wasn't a good representation of his work. There's a lot of balance between light and dark in Dickens's fiction. A silliness sometimes to good and evil that was not represented well in this adaptation. And it resulted in audiences deadpanning it and critics shrugging their shoulders and being like, why was this ever made? As a historian and frequent watcher of period dramas, so this makes me an expert in the film industry, obviously. I believe new adaptations have to have two things in order for them to warrant a remake. First, it has to resonate in some way to a new generation and create a connection with their reality. They do have to be written in a way that a younger or a new audience goes, "Oh my gosh, that's crazy that that happened back then. I go through that today as well, and I can really resonate with that." If we're using Pride and Prejudice as an example, a good adaptation will weave some of the universal themes of the book onto the screen, such as Lizzie experiencing the impact of societal expectations versus personal desires, the lack of female independence and agency, the powers of sisterhood, marriage as security versus marriage for love. Some of these themes are still aspects of women's lives today that they can really relate to 200 years later. We have to create that historical connection with audiences over historical authenticity. I've done a bit of a deep dive on my thoughts on historical accuracy versus historical connection in my last video on the best and worst period dramas of 2024 that goes more in depth about why, as a historian, I'm not as bothered about historical accuracy sometimes, but I am really big on period dramas creating a historical connection with modern audiences. So secondly, they have to respect the original framework of the book or older series that they're based on enough for audiences to feel a connection with the story, but faithful enough that it highlights the distinct differences in our modern lives and the lives of people in the past. If we use Persuasion as an example, I think it's really important for adaptations of Persuasion to highlight the aspect of Anne Elliot being a spinster, what that meant culturally, the pressure she would have been under to originally find a husband, the instability of what her life would have looked like, remaining single because she was financially dependent on the men in her life. Persuasion is meant to be a bit of an emotional journey for Anne for a multitude of reasons, beyond just like a Bridget Jones style rom-com of misunderstanding and dating mishaps. I'm not trying to dogpile too much onto the 2020 version. It's important that people are able to enjoy the versions that they like. But what I'm trying to say is that by sticking with a lot of the original framework of Austen's work and focusing on aspects such as Anne's spinsterhood, rather than making it more of a comedy, audiences can resonate more with Anne's heartbreak in life because they get the full meaning behind what it would have been like to be a spinster. Women had limited financial and social mobility. People of color were persecuted or enslaved. There was worker exploitation or like limited medical advancements that affected people's lifespans or birth rates, which can be used in plot devices by historical authors because it was a huge part of their reality. These aspects, such as Anne's spinsterhood, are meant to impact audiences today, to make them feel empathy for her, to make it even more meaningful for her to finally get with the person she loves, despite the odds being against her. Elements of a time period in which an adaptation is made can be important to the storytelling, so by them diminishing some of them or leaving them out altogether, audiences can miss out on some of the intended meaning by the original author, or fans of those classics can feel as if they're disconnected from the story they know and love because there's context missing that is muted or missing. To me, the reason why you would do a straight up period drama of a classic instead of doing a modern remake like a Bridget Jones or a Clueless is because there's aspects of the time period that are important to impart to the audience. So what are the adaptations of Pride and Prejudice that we already have? First up is the 1940s film with Greer Garson and Laurence Olivier. Costume-wise, it was more akin to the mid-1800s as opposed to Regency, and I'm not really sure why they made that costume choice. But apparently Garson and Olivier had good chemistry as Elizabeth and Darcy. There was a 1980s BBC miniseries that some found subdued and a bit lackluster, but it was more of a solid adaptation of Austen's work compared to the others. Next is the 1995 version, of course, written by Andrew Davies with Jennifer Ehle and Colin Firth. Seems to be a lot of people's favorite for Ehle's performance as Elizabeth. People feel like she was a perfect representation of Austen's character. Colin Firth is not too shabby, of course, either. Next, there was the 2005 film directed by Joe Wright with Keira Knightley and Matthew Macfadyen. This film focused on cinematic storytelling, sweeping landscapes, and romantic lighting. It is really a feast for your eyes, but it's short in length, and script liberties meant that a lot of Austen fans don't care for it. Then there's been various like modern and offshoot versions. The web series, The Lizzie Bennet Diaries, Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, which that is the first Jane Austen related thing that Jordan ever saw. Still salty about that. No, I enjoyed Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. I was just annoyed that that was the first exposure he ever had to Jane Austen was through the zombies. The latest one has been An American in Austen, where an American is put into the plot of Pride and Prejudice. Don't ask. I think there is something special about Pride and Prejudice that people will watch it in any way that they slice it and dice it. And in some ways, I think that's because of the kind of enemies to lovers trope that Austen essentially established through Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy's love story. This narrative formula works so well over and over again in romance books that compared to some of her other novels, this one just seems to be the favorite dynamic that the love interests have between each other. So it can be replicated over and over again. So obviously, I think people will watch a new adaptation. However, like I was saying, people do have remake fatigue, and no one is asking for this. I think the resurgence of the 2005 Pride and Prejudice on TikTok is proof that you don't need to constantly be making new remakes of a classic story for it to resonate with people. That adaptation has absolutely blown up online, and it's 20 years old. It's 20 years old. It's 20 years old. I'm fine. I'm fine. It's all over the internet. Instagram, Tumblr, Facebook. The aesthetics of this film have a hold on audiences years later. The score is so recognizable. I'm convinced there is a whole generation of girls that took up piano just to try and play the score from this film, including me, and I was terrible at piano. But the lasting popularity today, and then on top of that, its resurgence in popularity online, shows that new adaptations don't have to be made just because time has passed. I'm not of the opinion that for every classic book that is labeled as timeless, that equates to it meaning that a remake should be made at any time. It's so important how a new remake is handled when it's scheduled to come out and how it's casted as to whether or not it's worth it to make it all over again. I think the cinematography and the music for this new film is going to be picked to pieces because of the 2005 version. So my hope is that they're not going to rush into making this just to kind of make some quick guaranteed money, and they're really going to put in the time for people to love this version as much as they do the older ones. If you're asking my opinion, here's what I think studios should be doing instead of making full-on remakes over and over and over again. I only really hear rumblings about remakes that no one has asked for. So Pride and Prejudice, the Forsyte Saga, the new Wuthering Heights. But what people aren't complaining about are transformative works. So films or books or games that are in the world of a book, but with different characters. For example, The Artful Dodger was just renewed by Disney Plus for a second season, and that follows the character of the Artful Dodger, who is a side character from Charles Dickens' Oliver Twist. This is such a fresh take on doing period dramas. It has a basis of a storyline we know and love, and then it explores what could have happened with a character that we connected with. For Artful Dodger, it shows us a grown-up version of him who moves to Australia, becomes a doctor in the late 1800s, and finds love. It's been one of my favorite period dramas in years because it's felt like an old school historical romance period drama that we used to love from the mid-2000s, but it's not the 20th adaptation of Oliver Twist over and over again. Another example of this is one I'm really excited about, and that is The Other Bennet Sister, which follows the love story of Mary Bennet. I think out of all of the sisters in Pride and Prejudice, Mary is the one that I would want to know the most about, as it felt like her marriage prospects were the most precarious. This is in development right now, and it's based on the book by the same name by Janice Hadlow, and it's masterfully written in my opinion, and it goes really well as a companion for Pride and Prejudice. I'm way more excited for the other Bennet sister than I am Pride and Prejudice itself because it's telling us a new story, but it's based on another story that we know and love. So I think studios should start heading more towards making these transformative adaptations that focus on side characters that we'd love to know more about. And that way they will still capture the audience they were so eager to capture from making these remakes anyways. So what should we be looking for in a new adaptation of Pride and Prejudice? Like, what's the dream? Casting is important, and the chemistry between all the main characters is really important for this, I feel like. Showcasing Austen's writing style as far more of a commentary on society and women's experiences than just the romance element is really important in a modern adaptation, I feel like. And lastly, it's got to be visually pleasing. You know what I mean? I got to see some rocks and mountains. Austen was so real for that. What are men compared to rocks and mountains? I've gone through things that I think would be great to see in a big budget multi-episode version of Pride and Prejudice made in 2025, but I'd love to hear what you guys think. If you disagree or you think I've left something out, please comment below. I would love to hear your feedback. And hopefully I'll be back on here to make a new video at some point where we're reacting to a new Pride and Prejudice. We shall see. Goodbye.